For those of you who don't know Adelaide Resources, the company is actually, it's not a new company. It's been around on the ASX now. I think it's the 16th year this year. But only 145 million shares on issue, few unlisted options and whatnot. 5.1 in the bank at the end of December, the end of the December quarter. 2,000 odd shareholders, very largely Australian. 93% of the register is Australian. Top 20, 34. I won't bore you with all this stuff, but the very bottom one, market cap at the moment is a measly about 8.8. In fact, I think it's even lower today than that. Now, this is one of these situations where the market is more of a barometer of sort of attitude about investing than value, in my view. So let me explain why. Very briefly, the board, Andrew Brown, whose CV you have just heard from Tim, is our chairman. He's a Sydney-based guy. Myself, a geologist. We've got an accountant, a mining engineer that I guess his main claim to fame was he built the granites for Normandy, and another geologist to keep me honest so that he can tell the rest of the board whether I'm being honest with them. And then our senior management, we have an accountant, Nick Harding, who's our CFO. And another lady, Geo, Barbara Anderson, a Kiwi, very proud Kiwi geologist who's our exploration manager and spends an enormous amount of time in the field. We're South Australian, sort of based in Adelaide. We're a gold copper explorer. We have uranium as a secondary target commodity. Our projects are all Australian, South Australia, Northern Territory, and a very soon-to-be granted tenement in the Drummond Basin in Queensland. All in districts with a pedigree of delivering what would be company maker type discoveries for a company our size. We're an aggressive driller. We've got over the last couple of years, we've spent a hell of a lot of money drilling holes and enjoyed a lot of success there. I'll talk about that, most particularly our Rover project at near Tennant Creek and in South Australia near Moonta. And we choose to fund our uranium efforts through joint ventures, and we have a joint venture with Quasar Resources, for example, in South Australia. This is a graph which just shows self-funded plus joint venture funding into the projects that the company has. So for the last sort of significant amount of time, we've really been having a good honest go for our shareholders in our view. We put a lot of money into the ground for a company our size. Last year was a record in terms of our exploration spend, over 4.5 when we take into account money spent on our behalf on our joint ventures. We try to keep the admin reasonably low, and my assessment is that it's about average for a company our size listed in Australia, so we're not over the top there. So it's about putting it where it matters for investors. Despite all this, this is a very sad tale of our share price over the last 12 months. It's come back from about 18 cents. I think today it's somewhere sub 6. I think it closed today. And as I said, it gives us a market cap of a measly 8.5 million or something like that, of which 5.1 is money, cash. And so really my job here is to explain to you that is a very, very poor reflection on what the real value of this company is, and let's go and do that. Here's the project, South Australia, Northern Territory and in Queensland. I really want to focus on the Northern Territory project, our Rover project. From there I'll drop down to Moonta on the Yorke Peninsula, and then we'll have a very quick look at a couple of others, and then we'll finish up. So Rover, we're about 85 kilometres as the crow flies from Tennant Creek. Now Tennant Creek has a long, proud history of mines which were very, very high grade and were produced very profitably, particularly by companies like Pico, Australian Development Limited, and of course Normandy had a very significant was a very significant field for Normandy through its growth. We're actually down about to the southwest of Tennant, exploring geology that's identical to Tennant Creek, but is buried under some I guess relatively shallow cover, 100 metres of sediments, which is why it was never found before, called the Rover Field. Tennant Creek, a little bit of a geology lesson here because I'm a geologist. This is an ironstone outcrop near the Warrego Road in Tennant Creek, and these are the sorts of rocks that we look for up in that area to host copper and gold. And the Tennant Creek field itself produced about 5.5 million ounces of gold to date, about 500,000 tonnes of copper, and as I said, they're hosted in rocks like that, very ironstone-rich beasts. Now, here's just some past production figures for mines from that general district, and I guess the thing to really focus on here, and I'll just see if I can use this, is the production grade in gold that these mines have produced at. So Noble's Knob, 17 grams, Juno, 56 grams per tonne, White Devil, 14.6, and then some of the more copper-rich things, 3.6, 4%. This is a field that produces really, really high-grade gold and copper deposits. And, so that's what we're looking for up there, because any of those would transform us from an $8 million company into about a $180 million company or more. What do these things look like? This is a cross-section through Juno, that wonderful high-grade one. Again, it's a bit of geology, but basically you have an ironstone or some iron-rich rocks, which are the oranges and the reds here, enclosed in a zone of altered chloride alteration. Don't worry about what chloride is if you're not a geologist, but it's part of the story up here. And then somewhere within these iron-rich rocks, you can have these high grades of high pods of high-grade gold and copper. And that's the sort of an example there. One of the things that is a bit scary for us is that the dimensions of these things can be tiny. There was basically about 815,000 ounces was produced from a volume of only 70 by 40 by 50 metres, and they're very, very small exploration targets. But boy, wouldn't we love one of those. Now, because they're in ironstone rocks, and the ironstones are largely magnetite, we can actually find these things using airborne and ground magnetics, which has been a very successful way of looking for these things. And this is a magnetic image of our project down at Rover, and it's these red dots and whatnot. I've hidden most of them with stars actually, which are where the prospects are, but they're all magnetic anomalies that tell us where we should be looking. So let's have a look at a couple of these. Rover 1. Rover 1, if you follow the Tennant Creek area, you'll know of a company called Westgold Resources, who've actually got a 1.2 million ounce gold equivalent resource at Rover 1. Now, that is the same Rover 1 that I'm about to talk about. This is the tenement boundary that goes across, cuts the deposit, with Westgold's resource sitting sort of down here. This is the magnetic anomaly that formed, that Rover 1 is associated with. And then we have, particularly in the northwest of the deposit, a share of the Rover 1 deposit. So what we're going to do is, this is a plan projection of this ironstone, or these iron-rich rocks looking down. Let's have a look at a slice through here, a bit like that Juno slice that we did. And here's a section. All the iron-rich rocks are these purple things here. We don't quite know what happens over on Westgold's side. This is the tenement boundary right here. And then within them, here we have our pods of gold and copper mineralisation, very similar to what I showed at Juno. And there's some very, very handsome grades there. So we've got some nice metal at Rover 1 on our side of the tenement boundary. I don't expect you to read this. This is just a table of some of the drill intersections we've achieved here over the last couple of years, and there are some very, very impressive intersections indeed amongst that lot. We'll move now to, this is what the stuff looks like. I put it in because as a geologist, this just makes me drool, this stuff. This is all copper sulphide sitting in the magnetite ironstone through here. Goes about, I think it's about 10% copper, these trays. It's just beautiful stuff. So if we can find some more of that, we'll have some very happy shareholders. Let's just go about 2 kilometres up the road to Rover 4. Now, I said that Rover 1 we only have part of that because of the tenement boundary. Well, we've got all of this one. Very similar sort of thing where we're finding copper and gold principally in 2 areas. And we'll just again look at a quick cross-section through here. So here's our purpley iron-rich rocks here and pods of particularly copper-rich material sitting within Rover 4. So that's looking pretty interesting for us. And another table of intersections, which I also won't dwell on, but again, there's some pretty impressive stuff there. So prospect number 2. Now we'll go to one that we've just been drilling recently called Rover 12, which is about 20 kilometres to the west of Rover 1 and Rover 4. one of the a very, very large magnetic feature, which tells us that maybe down here there's something that, you know, potentially the size of Rover 1 or something like that. Remember, it's about 1 million ounces. It's had a bit of historic drilling, which has had some anomalous metal, and we've been working at it just late last year, drilling a few holes. Here's a section. So we've got an ironstone down through here, in these holes, and we're waiting on assays for particularly a zone here. We're waiting on assays on the bottom of 2 of these holes, but particularly this one here. This is massive copper sulfide in this bit of core here, and we're expecting that there might be some pretty interesting results to come out of that. So hopefully that'll be prospect number 3, and perhaps looking more like a new discovery for the Rover field. Another one, very briefly, this is actually a gravity anomaly that we tested last year. Because of these high iron rocks, they're also very dense rocks, so they'll produce, number 1, a magnetic anomaly, but number 2, potentially a gravity anomaly, and this is what one of these is. We haven't assayed this yet either. This is being done as we speak, but again, we've got some dense rocks there with a little bit of sulphide, so we're waiting to see what that looks like as well. So, sort of in summary, I suppose we've got some really significant grades of copper and gold on our part of the Rover 1 deposit. We've got some lovely copper particularly and gold as well at Rover 4. Some pretty interesting early stage targets. Many other, you know, high quality exploration targets that have to be tested at some stage. And, you know, I firmly believe this project is one of the, you know, sort of most prospective copper gold projects that any junior company's got around the nation. If you compare our assays and our intersections, you know, with those others who are making some you know, a bit of a fanfare in the copper space, then these hold their heads proud. That's just the Adelaide Resources part. I want to actually just step back a little bit and talk a bit more broadly about what's happening up at Tennant Creek and Rover, the bigger picture, because you can never divorce yourself from the bigger picture. This is the Rover field. Our grounds, this ground in yellow, basically, and the little red dots are the confirmed Tennant Creek style mineralising systems. The other companies that are on here, Westgold's all this country around here, and I mentioned Westgold, they're the company that's got the other bit of Rover 1. This is Tennant Creek Gold, or TNG, and Western Desert down there. But basically, Adelaide Resources controls the majority of what's currently the accepted extent of the Rover field, which puts us in a very strong position strategically. Westgold, as I mentioned, have a resource of about 1.2 million ounces. They've got a pre-feasibility study underway. They're planning an exploration decline to give them a closer platform to drill the thing out on their side of the boundary. But the point is that this field is on the path of development. And I guess, you know, it's one thing to go out and find a deposit in an area where there are no mills or there's no infrastructure. Once there are mills and infrastructure, of course, then the targets which you can turn into $1 for your shareholders can be a bit smaller. Just up here's what they sort of plan to do from the surface, a decline winding its way around. These are their resources. This is taken from a presentation that Westgold gave at Mines and Money in London in December. Whereabouts is our stuff? Well, we've got the extension over the boundary of this western zone. So this is where our copper is, and our gold at Rover 1 sort of sits in about the same position, and, you know, potentially could contribute to a production there. So what does it all mean? I guess I won't go through this, but to me, at Rover, I think our downside is sort of limited, but the upside is uncapped. Let's race ahead. Was that a ding for time that I got there? No, it wasn't. It was someone else. Right, okay. Now let's just drive the 85 k's back into Tennant Creek and have a look at what else is happening around there. Emerson Resources, ASX code ERM, strongly re-rated late last year despite the pretty parlous state of the markets. They went from sort of 10 cents to about 25 cents or so on the back of some wonderful intersections that they've been achieving in more of the traditional Tennant Creek field. These guys, Emerson, own the Warrego Mill, and their discovery, in fact, is not too far from it. Truscott, some pretty exciting results. So I saw the market latch onto them in 2010. They've got sort of small gold resource right in town. Excalibur's, I guess they've been up and down a bit, but they've got a nearly 300,000 ounces of resources. And I just put these up because I think it really is just a matter of time before we see mining recommencing in this high-grade Tennant Creek Rover district, whether it's at Rover or Tennant Creek. And to me, you can't divorce the fact that we are a key player up here in Tennant Creek, Adelaide Resources. So, I think that looks very fabulous for us. Let's drive about 2,500 kilometres to the south, down to the Yorke Peninsula in South Australia, where we have our Moonta project, and this is directly around the old sort of historic copper mining area on the Yorke Peninsula of Moonta, Kadina and Wallaroo, or the Copper Triangle as it was known. This is another area that's delivering pretty exciting results. I don't know, I've got on this slide some tenements owned by Rex Minerals, who you may or may not be aware if you follow copper, have discovered the Hillside deposit to the south of us. So Hillside's about 200 million tonnes at about 0.7 copper, and looks like it might go the distance. It's, I guess, more regionally, it's in the same belt of rocks that we have, Olympic Dam, Prominent Hill, Carapatina and whatnot. So it's this Olympic copper-gold province where we find these sorts of things. Here's our project with a few of the prospects on it. We've actually got 2 rigs here as we speak, working as we speak. Well, one of them is because it's doing 2 shifts. The other blokes from the smaller rig will be in the pub like we are, I reckon. But anyway, because they're drillers. Now, I want to have a quick look at the prospect that really got us excited here last year. It's a prospect called Willow Malka. It's started out as about a 1.5 kilometre long geochemical anomaly, which are these little purple contours that you can see here. And then we came in and we drilled that with all those little white dots are the collars of our drill holes. And what we found was about a zone of mineralisation about 1.2 kilometres long, open at both ends. And within that, about a 550 metre zone which we call Shoot A, where we see some thicker and higher grade. It's only a low to moderate grade thing, but it's very, very shallow. If we look at it, just one section, just to sort of keep up the thing, the pattern. There's 20 metres. This is the cover sediments. The whole thing's actually buried under very, very thin sand dunes and whatnot. And then we have copper mineralisation, we hope persisting. We're drilling down here at the moment to try and see what's at depth. But, sort of reasonable widths, good grades. The way you read this, that's 17 metres at 2.6 grams of gold and 1% copper. That starts about 18 metres below the surface. 19 metres at nearly a percent of copper down there. So pretty interesting stuff, and we're trying to make this and other prospects in this area grow up as I speak with some more drilling. Table of results showing the sort of results we've received at Willow Malka. Again, I won't dwell on these, but other than putting them up there to make the point that there's some pretty juicy stuff in here as well. This is what the thing kind of looks like, a very early model in 3 dimensions. So here's we're kind of looking from the air back towards the north, and you can see all the drill holes are all inclined drill holes, so the surface would, if we drew it on, would be a plane through here, and this green blob is the copper deposit. It remains open at depth, particularly in the southwestern zone, which is where we're currently drilling to see whether we can make it grow down, as it were. So that looks pretty good. And this, as I mentioned, this hillside resource of Rex's, 217 million tonnes. This is hillside and Rex and the hillside thing of Rex is at the same scale. So, okay, I mean this is their inferred resource boundary. It's pretty big, but look, we're not dealing with something that's too dissimilar. So let's hope that keeps going. Once we've finished at Willow Malka, there's a whole range of other targets that we want to test. This is just a plan of the geochemistry that we've done there. All those little red blobs are copper anomalies, and we're also testing some of those in this current round of drilling. So just to summarise there, it's a pretty good sized tenement. It's about 800 odd square kilometres in this world-class Olympic copper-gold province. We're seeing shallow, low to moderate grade, but shallow mineralisation at Willow Malka. Got a pipeline of other targets there, and as I said, we've got 2 drill rigs as we speak. Very briefly on a couple of other of the projects I mentioned, we do our uranium search through joint venture, using joint venture funding. We have a joint venture with Quasar, large project on the Eyre Peninsula looking for uranium deposits in paleochannel systems. And if you follow, well, you won't follow Quasar because they're not listed, but you might follow Alliance who are in joint venture with them at the 4 Mile discovery. We're looking for deposits that are geologically similar to 4 Mile in a different area. Now, you know, Alliance and Quasar have had their differences of opinion, but it looks like they're resolving them. I'd have to say that, you know, that our relationship with Quasar has been superb. We've found them to be wonderful joint venture partners. They're currently spending all of the freight. Our equity as it stands in this area is 32.5. However, if our equity were to be diluted to 25, that's where it stays. There's a floor. So we've basically got a 25% free carry through to decision to mine if we get lucky on this one. Just some recent results from sort of late last year in a program of drilling that they did up in the what we call the Anomaly channel. We're just going to zoom into that area and you know, their interpretation of where one of these parts of this old creek or river system were, that in grey, their drill holes in red and blue, and this hole here, this is a gamma log. So what they do is they drill the hole and they basically drop a scintillometer down the hole and sees how much radiation's coming out of the ground. And what we saw at the bottom of the hole is this lovely spike here in red, which is confirmed as uranium. Exactly the right sort of geology, the right sort of stuff. They're quite excited about this result. We're quite excited about this sort of result. So it's been a bit of a sleeper for us, but you know, it's moving in the right direction technically, in my view. In the same area, we've got this is a gold project that's been sitting a bit idle, and we're going to have to get this going again. There's a few intersections that we've achieved in our discoveries out here in the past. You know, some pretty handsome gold grades when gold's 17.25 US. So that one's back on the agenda to have a think about. And as I mentioned, some ground about to be granted finally after about 2.5 years of going through the processes in Queensland. I'm surprised at the time, but I'm told it's nothing surprising for those who've been in Queensland. The tenement in question is, I think we're about 50 or 60 kilometres to the east of Pajingo or Viranansi, which has, you know, produced over 4 million ounces of epithermal gold, and wouldn't we love one of those at Adelaide Resources? So, just to come to the end of it all, what we're seeing, I think, is a company with a very strong and strategic position in the Tennant Creek Rover field, which is back on the track to mining. You know, Tennant Creek, there hasn't been any sort of production since about 2005 up there. It's a matter it's a matter of when, not if, for mining to return to that district, and we're going to be a key player up there. Moont is a strategic position down here in the South Australian copper gold belt, world-class thing. Got some interesting results happening there, and as I said, we're drilling as we speak. Some interesting exposure to uranium, funded by another party. Very dedicated people. We're not broke. We've got enough to go and execute some of these plans. And I guess my final point is that at a market cap of 8 million or thereabouts, we are way, in our view, very undervalued. So Adelaide's a good investment position option for you in our view. Thank you very much.